Hello everyone and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name's Rhiannon and today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in January. I am very surprised with myself, guys, because I actually managed to read 9 books in January. Now, before we get too excited, 5 of those were graphic novels, which I will of course get into further along in the video, but they definitely helped to bump up that number. Otherwise, I do of course have 4 standardly published novels that I'm going to talk about, but I will say I do have a range of different genres here, which is definitely something that helped me in January. I feel like having a change of pacing and also a change of genre was exactly what I needed in that first month, because it really did help me to break up the stories, and it did also give me a break from some dense fantasy books that I read as well. So without further ado, let's dive into the video so that I can talk to you guys about all the books that I read and give you my overall thoughts and ratings as well. The first book that I read in 2025 was such a good one, and that one was Malice by John Gwynne. This is the first book in the Faithful and the Fallen series, and I'm actually reading this series as part of the Catch-Up Book Club, which, if you don't know, is a book club hosted by Becca and the Books here on YouTube, which predominantly focuses on backlist fantasy series. I read the A Song of Ice and Fire series as part of this book club. I also read The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb, and now I'm back to tackle The Faithful and the Fallen, and I couldn't be happier. If you couldn't tell from the cover alone, this one is the first book in an adult epic high fantasy novel, and I'm not gonna lie, I was definitely apprehensive diving into this book. I feel like that's always the case for me with a new fantasy world because I'm not quite sure how it's going to work for me. However, this book was fantastic. I feel like I got to grips with the world and the characters pretty quickly, and after about 100 pages or so, I was completely immersed in the story. Now, I don't actually know how to describe this properly to you guys because it's a very crazy story, but essentially we have a war in here between humans and giants. This has been going on for centuries, however recently it seems to be getting worse. The giants are stirring once more, there are worms sighted in this land as well, and to top it off we have some stones that are weeping blood. Those who can still read the ancient signs realise that a prophecy is coming to light, which states that sorrow will darken the world as angels and demons make it their battlefield. In the midst of this, we are following a lot of different characters. Some are of more importance than others, but in particular we do have Corbin, who is a young boy at the start of this novel. Corbin watches enviously as the boys in his village start their training to become men, because he is determined to make his family proud, and he has to wait until his next birthday in order to prove himself and begin training on the battlefield with the rest of the men of this village. Now, for a lot of this novel, this is what drives Corbin. However, it's only when everything he knows is threatened that he actually realises the true cost of becoming a man. And then it just says here, as the kings look to their borders and priests beg answers from the gods, only a chosen few know that the fate of the world will be decided by 2 champions, the Black Sun and the Bright Star, and with their coming will be a war to end all wars. I feel like I did a really rubbish job of summing up this book, but it's so difficult to try and summarize. There is so much that goes on in here. We have so many characters, as I mentioned, and I believe that we have even more in the second book as well. But all in all, I absolutely love this book. The only thing I will say is that there is a lot of violence against animals in here, which is to be expected to some extent going into an adult high fantasy novel. However, there is one scene in particular in here that honestly made me feel ill. For those of you who don't know, I'm a massive animal lover, and I do struggle to read scenes that depict violence towards animals, but normally I can stomach it and get past it because I keep telling myself that it's fake, it's in a fantasy novel, you're good. But this was so hard-hitting, so unnecessary, and so disgusting that I really did struggle. It also happens to some of my favourite animals as well, which I'm not going to go into because I don't think it's a spoiler, but I'd rather not say. All I will say is that throughout this book there are quite a few different occurrences of violence towards animals and also animal deaths, so if that is something that you don't want to read about or struggle to read, then I would caution you diving into this series. I feel like throughout the majority of the books things are mentioned that you can get past. However, yeah, as I said, I was reading one scene and I really struggled. There was just some descriptions that turned my stomach and it did lower my enjoyment slightly, so because of that I did give this one 4 stars. I really loved the world building, the exposition, the characters, everything was so well put together, and because of that it made it an easy story to follow. But unfortunately I did have to deduct a star because of the violence towards animals. I feel like it wasn't necessary in some parts, and yeah, it did bring my enjoyment down slightly. So that is why it got a 4 and not a 5, but it's definitely a fantastic start to this series. I have the second book on my TBR for February already, and I can't wait to discuss my thoughts on this book in the live show, which will be happening at the beginning of March, I believe. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Hike by Lucy Clark. Now, unfortunately, I can't find this book anywhere. I do own a physical copy of it somewhere, but I must have misplaced it somewhere because I can't find it for the life of me. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to just pop the cover up on screen. But this is one that I've been extremely excited to get to ever since I bought it. For those of you who don't know, Lucy Clark is a favourite author of mine. She is definitely an author for me, and The Hike is her latest release. However, she does have a new book coming out later on this year, which I have of course pre-ordered. But I bought this book during the summer months, and I did say that I wanted to read it towards the beginning of the year, just because we are in a snowy setting, and I just thought that it would be perfect to read in the colder months. But in this one, we follow 4 friends, Maggie, Liz, Helena and Joni, and every year they organise a holiday. For this holiday in particular, Liz has decided to take them up into the mountains in order to complete a difficult hike, and so begrudgingly the other 3 friends have to start training for this hike and obviously get the correct gear. They lace up their hiking boots for the adventure of a lifetime in the Norwegian wilderness, which is a place of towering mountains, glass-like lakes, log cabins and forests stolen from fairy tales. It's the perfect place for them to go and lose themselves. However, that is until a broken body is found. Somewhere out there, someone knows exactly how and why this woman was killed, and our 4 friends unknowingly set out on a hike that will change the course of their lives forever, because in this deep, dark wilderness, there is a killer on the loose. Doesn't that just sound great, you guys? I was so excited to get to this one, but unfortunately, it wasn't my favourite. I feel like our main characters are just a little bit stupid. When the friends get to their first resort, it's clear that a storm is coming and a lot of people warn them against going on this hike. However, our main character doesn't tell her friends this because she's desperate to go out and hike this trail and prove to herself that she can do it. And so she doesn't tell them that they are walking into a storm. All they have is the gear that they have on their backs, and that's not going to help them in any kind of treacherous weather. As well as that, no one has actually trained for this trip. They all said they were going to and then just didn't. And as I said, this hike is difficult. It is not easy. It's one of the most difficult hikes there. And so with the fact that people are actually warning them against going because of the weather, and the fact that they haven't actually prepared at all to do this hike, you'd think that they would reevaluate their circumstances. However, they don't. They just decide, you know what, we're going to do it, and they go out and try and get it done. And of course, that is when things start to go awry because the weather turns and they realise that they are in way over their heads. So I feel like that was definitely my main issue with this book. The setting was beautiful. It was so idyllic. Of course, it was used to turn the story into a sinister one the further along we got in the novel, which I really do like as a plot device. At the beginning, you know, it's picturesque. It is such a beautiful place, but of course, as soon as the storm arrives, it becomes completely different, and that landscape which you thought was so idyllic could actually be your biggest downfall. I feel like the mystery itself was definitely a believable one. I was intrigued from the get-go, and I wanted to figure out what was going on. The way that it also intertwined with our characters' fates and where they were at as well was really interesting, and I personally thought was well done. However, as is the issue for me with a lot of thrillers, I feel like everything came together so quickly at the end, and I wasn't fully satisfied with the way that it ended. I feel like the last few Lucy Clark books that I've read have been more of a murder mystery or a slower thriller. This one was trying to be something different, and whilst I didn't hate it, I just feel like I'm so used to Lucy Clark's writing now, I do prefer her slower murder mystery type of books rather than this thriller one. So I did go ahead and give it 3 stars. It was an enjoyable one. I'm glad that I read it. It wasn't my favourite, unfortunately, but it was nothing awful. So I've given it a 3 stars, kind of middle of the road, and I'm definitely looking forward to Lucy Clark's next book being released now, which is going to be in the first half of this year. The next book that I read was Lie or Die by AJ Clark. This is another one where I don't have the physical copy of because I have actually unhauled it. Now, I'm not saying this book was bad at all. I actually really enjoyed this one. It is a YA thriller, which I don't tend to read a lot of nowadays, but as I said, I had a really good time with it. And the thing that drew me to this one was the tagline, because it said that it was a mix between Knives Out and The Traitors. And for those of you who don't know, I absolutely love Knives Out. I've loved both films so far, and The Traitors is one of my all-time favourite TV shows. So this was definitely sounding to be something that was right up my street. I think for this one, I am just going to read you the synopsis. I do have it on Goodreads up in front of me here. I'm honestly not quite sure how to describe it, and I don't want to spoil anything, so I think that's just the safest bet. It says, 10 strangers trapped in a television studio, 42 remote cameras, 5 dead bodies. When a casting call is announced for a new reality TV show Lie or Die, Cass is tricked into auditioning by her best friend. Big Brother meets Mafia, Lie or Die pits contestants against each other as they try to discover who is a murderous agent and who is an innocent player. But when contestants start to turn up dead, the real kind, not the fake kind, Cass realizes that not being eliminated and winning the game is the least of her worries. No longer a game of truth and lies, Cass and her friends are in a fight for survival. Reality just got very real. So you can definitely see why I wanted to pick up this book. And as I said, I did have a good time with it overall. Reading a YA thriller is just so refreshing, and I feel like every now and again you should pick one up because it's a perfect palate cleanser. I flew through this book so quickly and I was actually really immersed in the story. This one did start off pretty slowly. We have some teenage drama and of course the casting call to get through. However, once our characters are in this isolated setting of the house and the TV show, that is when the pacing starts to increase, and slowly we learn that a few players have ulterior motives for putting themselves in the game. And if you've seen the traitors, you'll know that whoever has a secret is instantly labelled as being untrustworthy. Now, I do think that Cass is a great main character. She seems to be pretty reliable, and I feel like she's definitely the one that readers will feel the most empathy towards as well. The game was also such a fun element. I feel like that was a very strong part of the story. Because I'm obviously familiar with the traitors, I did catch on to how the game was played pretty quickly, and it is definitely similar to having your traitors and faithful. However, there's also an agent in this game, and the agent every night can reveal the identity of one player of their choosing. So that definitely ups the stakes a little bit, and I found that to be such a good element to it. Of course, no one's telling each other what they are in the game because the agents, of course, would be murdered as soon as they let on that they were the agent, because they have the power to uncover people's identities. The murderers are targeting everyone else, essentially, and the players are trying their best to work together to eliminate the murderers. Now, I feel like where this book lost me a bit was the ending. Again, as with The Hike, it's really hard for a thriller to give me a satisfying conclusion, and I feel like this was just very messy. Now, whilst I did enjoy it, and whilst there were a few twists and turns, all in all, I feel like it could have been handled a lot better, because I feel like as soon as one thing happened, everything was happening so quickly and you couldn't actually keep up. And it also left off in a way that there could be a sequel. I'm not sure if there's going to be. I feel like it would have been pretty good as a standalone. However, something does happen that leads me to believe that there is going to be a second book. So I will definitely be reading that one when it comes out. I don't know if I want to buy a physical copy just because I've already unhauled Lie or Die myself, but I'm definitely intrigued enough to carry on. I did give this one 4 stars. I know I'm talking about it as if I gave it a lower rating, but for what it was a really good book. I really did enjoy myself reading it, and as I said, it has me intrigued enough to continue on with the rest of the books in the series, however long that might be. So all in all, this was a solid read. I really did enjoy it, and I would definitely recommend if you are wanting to read a different type of YA thriller. This is the part now where I tell you about 5 graphic novels that I read. They are all part of the same series, and you've probably seen it from the thumbnail what these are, but it is of course the Heartstopper series by Alice Oseman. So as you can see, I do own volumes 1 to 5 here, and I did fly through all of these in one weekend. I do have a dedicated reading vlog of me reading the series as well, so I will leave that linked up above and down below if you would like to check that out. I had such a fun time at filming this vlog. I'm so happy that I finally decided to read these graphic novels because I've owned them for years and I just kept putting them off because I'm not really a romance reader. If it's in my fantasy, then I'm okay with it, but I don't go out of my way to read romance novels, and so I feel like I was a little bit apprehensive diving into these because it's just not what I enjoy at all. However, I completely see the hype for this. I absolutely loved every single installment. I'm actually really sad that the next installment is going to be the last one as well, but I'm hoping it's going to be just as good as these because they were just so cute and wholesome. I feel like everyone knows what Heartstopper is about, but in case you don't know, we follow our main character Charlie, who is out as gay, and one day he meets Nick. Now Nick is in year 11 and Charlie's in year 10, however they quickly form a friendship, and through this friendship Nick realizes that there is more to himself than he ever thought, and we just see such an amazing friendship bloom between these two main characters as well as the other side characters as well, and we slowly see Charlie start to fall for Nick. However, they are completely different. Charlie keeps himself to himself, he doesn't want to bring attention to himself, and Nick is actually a rugby player. He's kind of one of the lads, if you want to say that, and Charlie doesn't think that he has a chance with him. However, love works in mysterious ways, and sometimes good things are waiting just around the corner. corner. If you've ever thought about giving this series a go, I would highly recommend it. This is coming from a person who doesn't really enjoy romance novels. I fell head over heels in love with these characters and the side characters as well. It's just such a wholesome series with so many good representation in here. I feel like it's such an important series as well for everyone to read, and the fact that younger kids now have access to a series like this is going to be so helpful for so many people, and I truly do think that everyone should read this series and give it a go because it's phenomenal. It's just so lovely and wholesome, and yeah, I absolutely loved my time reading this. So I did give each installment 5 stars. They are very quick and easy to fly through, but they pack a punch, guys, especially as we get to the later volumes as well. There is a lot of difficult topics that are brought up and talked about, which again is so important, and the way it's done is fantastic in my opinion. I personally have struggled with a few things that are talked about in this series, and for me personally the representation is great, and whilst it's not the easiest thing to talk about or read about, I feel like it's so important, and as I said, it's nice for people to know that they're not alone and that there is a way past it all in the end. And yeah, everyone's just so lovely and supportive, and I just love it, guys. So please do pick them up if you haven't already. As I said, the last volume is coming out pretty soon, so this will all be done then, and you could definitely fly through these so quickly just as I did because they really don't take too much time at all. But yeah, as I said, for a quick read they do pack a punch, and I am happy that I finally managed to get to this series. And then the final book that I read in January is one of my all-time favourites, and that one is of course Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. I loved this book, you guys. For those of you who don't know, this is the 3rd book in the Imperium saga by Rebecca Yarros. The first book in this series is called Fourth Wing. Now you've probably all heard of Fourth Wing. It took BookTube, BookTok, Bookstagram by storm when it first came out, and it has fast become one of my all-time favourite series. In the first book we follow our main character who is called Violet Sorrengail, and she has been training her whole life to become a scribe in the Scribe Quadrant. However, her mother, the commanding general of the Dragon Riders Quadrant, forces her to enter that one with her. But Violet is smaller than everyone else. She also has a condition which means that she has brittle bones, and so pairing this with the fact that she's been training to be a scribe her whole life and not a dragon rider, she is at a massive disadvantage. Not only that, but over the years fewer dragons have been willing to bond to cadets, and so people are willing to kill Violet in order to increase their chances of becoming a dragon rider. On top of all of this, there are also other people who want to target Violet specifically as well, because I mentioned earlier that her mother is a general in the Dragon Riders Quadrant, and she was actually responsible for executing a load of people who were involved in a rebellion, and as punishment their kids had to join the Dragon Riders Quadrant, and so there are a lot of people in there who blame Violet and her mother for the deaths of their family, and so they will do anything to try and take them down because they believe that through targeting Violet it's eventually going to hurt her mother. But what they don't know is that her mother is a general for a reason. She is stony-faced and quite emotionless, to be honest, but none of this seems to faze the other cadets because Violet is constantly facing danger and is trying to survive from day to day in this hostile environment. With every day that passes, the war outside the walls of Buscaeth grows more and more deadly, the kingdom's protective wards are failing, and the death toll keeps on rising. And in the midst of all this, Violet is starting to suspect that leadership isn't telling them the whole truth. I feel like I did a rubbish job at summing up this book, but that's the best I can come up with right now. We also have Xaden in here, who you may have heard about. He is the son of one of the leaders of the rebellion, and he should have more of an issue with Violet than anyone. He is one of the most ruthless and powerful wing leaders that Buscaeth has ever seen, and of course Violet gets put right on in there with him, and so we have a bit of an enemies to lovers thing going on. I don't want to spoil anything too much, but all I'll say is please read this series. It's fantastic. It's such a fast-paced series as well, and now that we're getting further along into this world, you see how intricately woven things are. Now I will say, this book in particular did take me a while to get into. I feel like there was a lot of the same thing happening and the plot wasn't actually moving anywhere. However, there came a point where all of that changed, and as soon as that happened, I couldn't put this book down. This had me so engrossed. There are so many different places that we get to see in here as well, new places with new customs, and it's really interesting to see how different the world is outside of the walls of Buscaeth, because that's what we've known. Buscaeth is the War College, for anyone who doesn't know. We've essentially been stuck there for the first 2 books, however we're branching out here and we have a purpose, and so we're seeing all these different places and the people who are there as well, and I just thought that that was so interesting. As well as that, that, we have relationships in here that are growing so strong, and I'm just constantly living in fear that something's going to happen to these characters. There were definitely a few deaths in here that hit me. I'm not going to go into anything, of course, but yeah, it was just heartbreaking. And they happen so quickly as well. And that's not a bad thing, because in this world and the environment that they're living in, death is just something that happens. And when someone dies, you just have to get over it and carry on, which, yeah, is just absolutely crazy. We also find out so much more about dragons in here, which I loved. And so, yeah, all in all, it was a 5-star, if you couldn't tell. I thoroughly enjoyed my experience reading this one. I've waited so long for it to come out, and now I'm really sad because I'm going to have to wait just as long for the next book as well. So there we have it, guys. These are all of the books that I managed to read in January, as well as The Hike and Lie or Die. All in all, I feel like I had such a good reading month. I didn't have any that were less than 3 stars, which is pretty good going. I enjoyed each and every single one, and I'm so glad that I managed to prioritize some books that I've been putting off for way too long. If you have made it this far through into the video and would like to let me know that you're still here, please go ahead and leave me a sword as the emoji of the video. One of my favourite books of this month was Malice by John Gwynne, even though I didn't give it the 5-star. I'm so excited to dive into the rest of the books in this series, and I feel like the sword is fitting because this is the first book that I read in 2025. It's one of my favourites and I can't stop thinking about it. And so yeah, if you are still here but don't have anything in particular that you would like to say, please go ahead and comment the sword emoji down below. As well as that, please don't forget to click the like button if you like this video, and the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content from me. Speaking of more content, I do have my own Patreon page in which I give you guys exclusive weekly live reading sprints, a monthly book club with the ability to vote on the book that we're going to choose to read each month. I will then film and post a spoiler-filled exclusive vlog for that book of the month as well. And you also get access to my Patreon live feed as well, where I give you guys daily updates and let you know what is going on in my life. So if that sounds like something you'd like to check out, I will leave the link down in the description box below. I do just want to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreons so far. It genuinely blows me away that you want to support me even further, and you guys mean the world to me. But we have such a great time on over there, and I can't wait to continue on and create even more content for you guys. With all that being said though, I am going to end this video here. Thank you so much for watching. It truly does mean the world to me, and I will see you soon in my next video. Goodbye!